Hello YouTube, my name is Alan Samsel and this is my channel, Alan's Cloud. Today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about Proxmox. It's my hypervisor of choice. I've been running it for over a year for several different virtual machines that I run pretty much 24/7 for several different services like Plex and some Docker containers that I run as well, which I've covered in other videos. But today I'm going to be talking about Proxmox version 5.4. It's pretty much the latest version. Some of the features that they've added to it have superseded some of my previous videos, so I'm going to cover that. And then pretty much the primary topic that I'm going to talk about today is clustering. And in fact, some of the disadvantages of doing it and some of the advantages of doing it, and I'll run you through also a website that details how to decluster, and because I had to go through that. So if any of that interests you, stick around. Alright, so first thing we'll talk about is one of the new features in Proxmox 5. It's actually, they've had a couple of updates to the PVE here recently, all good, and this one directly relates to storage. So in some of my first videos, when I first started using Proxmox, I'm a little old school. I wasn't using ZFS, didn't have the drives for that, didn't have or need the redundancy at that time. And I wasn't familiar with LVM enough to want to be able to, add volumes to it and shrink it and so forth. So, but I did know, hey, it's Debian under the hood here in Proxmox, and we can go ahead and mount local hard drives. So that was what I did. I found some guides online and, mounted them locally. And so all of that process of going in and SSHing in and changing the config files manually in order to be able to enable that and mount the drives and go find the UUIDs and write those down. It was a pretty lengthy, drawn out process, and Proxmox, I guess, had taken that under advisement, and they've added it in here to the PVE environment itself. So now here under and this is my second one, my second PVE. I have my other one down at the moment, but I copied all of my my 3 prime virtual machines over directly, and that worked. So, and I'll cover that in a minute too. But so you can see that what they do here, with the main hard drive that you've installed Proxmox onto, that becomes your local and your local LVM. I think it's Logical Volume Manager is what it is, and you can add to that, shrink to it, or add to it or shrink it as necessary. I actually do have a ZFS in this one here to tinker around with, just a couple of small drives I got mirrored. I've got a USB drive, and this is on another R710, a Dell R710 server. I've got an internal USB drive stuck in there that I was running the operating system on, and then took some advice the other day and wiped this system out and put a solid state drive in as the operating system, and so that's this one here now. But I'm using that USB drive, again mounted under the new directory method, to store ISO files, versus having that on these other drives as well. So, and I've got several drives here. These are 2 different, this one is a 1 terabyte storage SATA drive. This is a 136 or 140 gigabyte SAS drive, and this is a terabyte SAS drive. Then I've got my, so I've got the Docker container LXC running on here. I've got the SAS is my Windows machine. I want the fastest reads and writes for that for Plex. And then I have my my website, alanscloud.com, is actually running off of here in a Univention corporate server virtual machine. Working well, love it. It's my mail server as well, and sort of my if you've heard of Nginx, people use it as a reverse proxy. Just because of the way it's set up, I've got a different video on how to actually change the reverse proxy that's already in the Univention corporate server to suit my needs. Love it. It's really working out well. So I know I'm covering a whole lot of topics here. I've had a, a busy several weeks of obviously not uploading videos. That's because I've been working on hardware and doing upgrades and buying host bus adapter cards and throwing those in here and getting rid of the old Perk 6i cards in there. Been having a lot of fun, a lot of projects that I've been working on. But anyway, back to how to load a drive. So here under Data Center, you click on Storage, and you can actually see the drives that are in the machine, right? So it's a little bit different than the view that you get from the PVE. That's how you actually mount these things. But so you can see here that the path mount is now mount PVE and then the name that I've created for my storage. And then you can see the type here is called directory or ZFS or LVM thin. It's this directory here that is actually very useful. I format these drives with the Linux ext4 file system when I do this, because you can actually put the dumps on there, you can put the disk images, you can put every type of storage or backup possible you can add to this. And so with all of those different options, you don't have to worry about, like here with the ZFS, the only thing that ZFS will let you mount is, or store on the ZFS drive is disk images or containers. You can't put ISO files in there. It has to do with the type of storage it is, whether it's a file type storage or block type storage. But that's all well beyond the scope of what we're talking about here today. But you can see here that you can add directly from this first one here is called directory. Now you can add here in storage as well the CIFS and NFS, so that's a Samba share or the Linux network file sharing. A couple of different options here, the iSCSI, Gluster, these systems here I am not familiar with. I've seen them here as options, but I don't know anything about them yet. iSCSI, I haven't actually dabbled in that yet. I run Sigma NAS, or what was recently NAS for free, as my NASs, and so on there I already have Samba shares set up, but I tried to set up network storage using both of these options and couldn't quite get it to work. So I'm not quite there yet. I have a 10 gig backbone here between all of these machines. So what I was trying to do was create a storage area network where I have the virtual machines sitting on the network share and running on the node, and then I was attempting to do clustering so that I could migrate a running machine between nodes, or at least shut it down and migrate it a lot easier than I could manually shifting the virtual machines around. Anyway, long story short, there I couldn't get it to work, but I this new directory piece here has worked for several of the disks in all of the three now are 710s. As I said, I've been busy, so you click on directory and you give it a name, and you can choose here by holding down, I think it's the control key or maybe it's the command. I'm using a Mac here. What types you want to go into this directory here, and here you're adding it manually. So what I ended up doing versus adding it in here, I actually go to the PVE and I go to disks. So you get a slightly different view here. But so long as when you add a drive to your server, there are no partitions on it. If you've had previous information on there, you're going to want to wipe that out. I don't know that there's a way to save it. I didn't approach it from that perspective. There may be, but I'm not sure. But what I do know is that you can see the device, what it's mounted at here, and this is like I said, this is that 140 gigabyte hard drive that I have there. When you add it in and it doesn't have anything on it, it will probably say GPT no on here. It might say yes. But go ahead and go into your SSH, run fdisk on it, and completely wipe it. Get rid of the partition so that it's blank. And then you can just refresh this page and then click on the drive, and then this button here, initialize disk with GPT, should pop up. And then as soon as you do that, you will be able to come down here to directory and create directory. So with this one here, it's a little bit different than that one under the data center. It kind of takes care of it for you. Right now, I don't have any disks, for it to drop down because they're all in use. But any of them that you have added in there that you have initialized with GPT and are blank are capable of being created as a directory. So you would select that drive here. This is where you pick the file system that you're going to put on there. It's going to format it with. I picked the ext4, and then this is where you give it the name that shows up over here on the left. So I tend to call it storage or USB or whatever kind of the device is, HHD 1, 2, 3, and then the size of it, so that I know when I have different size disks in there, which one I'm actually putting it on. And then the add storage box is already checked on there, and then you hit create, and then it will actually show up here, under mount PVE, under that name, and then it'll write the file structure on there for you. See, all of this information here is what you had to hunt down when you used to go in and add this thing manually. But the reason why I'm bringing all of this up as far as doing this the right way now is that I'm having to blank out my primary Proxmox server, because when I went and added another node, having it mounted that old way actually screwed things up. I did end up having PVE1 and PVE2 in here, but the odd thing is that those manually mounted drives that aren't using this new directory system showed up on the second node as well, but didn't have the right amount of free space. They actually had the free space of the USB drive that was in there. It was all kind of dicked up. So not something that I really want any longer. And I needed, and wanted to do some maintenance on that machine. So had to break it out of the node that I had created first. So that was kind of a different adventure. Otherwise, I again, several reasons drove me towards creating a cluster and adding this second node to it. But this directory thing here is something that I really needed to clean up on that machine. And then when I built this secondary machine here, I did it the right way. I made them all using the new directory method, that you see here, and it works perfectly fine. And so you can tell the big difference, because now all of the directory ones that are mounted this way show up under mount PVE and then the name of the drive, whereas the way that I did it previously, it was just mount and then the name of the drive. And I have a feeling that was the reason why in the nodes in the cluster it showed up under both of them, because it didn't quite understand what I had done. So the clustering, that is kind of a whole different ball game here. There is a great video here, learnlytics.tv, on this guy goes through how to add another node into the cluster, he pretty much covers all the topics. It helped me get through it. It's not like it's a real difficult process, but I did run into some problems following his, but I think it was, again, because of my use of that other mounting system. I think had I started from scratch like I'm going to this second go round, I would have had a different experience when it comes to creating a cluster, and it probably would have more closely approximated what he showed here. So good video on how to do it, but because it did screw up, I needed to undo it. And there wasn't a whole lot of information out there on how to uncluster. So went and did some research and found this other YouTube video here, and I'll post links to all of these at the bottom, how to delete a Proxmox cluster. So his video, he's only got I think 266 views on this. It's a little clunky. in his walkthrough, but he basically gives you the link that he's following right here. And that was what I ended up going to and just following the steps. And it's actually, part of the Proxmox website itself, part of their wiki. So it talks about the Proxmox cluster file system, which is, exactly how the cluster runs and what it does. So if you scroll all the way down here to the bottom, after it talks about, the different files, talks about recovery, how to remove your cluster configuration, and essentially, you're going to stop the PVE cluster. I'm above version 4, so it's the systemctl stop PVE cluster, and then you're actually going to put your node back into local mode. The most important thing of this is when you're separating them out, I knew that I would never be taking the secondary machine and putting it back into the cluster, and it's a very big bulleted node on some of these other websites that you go to do this. That node can never go back into the cluster in that configuration if you the way that you break it. So I broke it, and basically reformatted it, so it didn't exist as the same node. It never could have entered, and that one, while that one was off, I went ahead and I followed these steps here on my main machine, put it back into its local mode, remove these cluster config files here. The auth key one didn't end up existing, so that didn't go through, so that's normal. And then stopped it all again here. Let's see here. Yeah, I did do those. Why that's commented out, that's a little weird. Then I did remove this lock file, and then I restarted it and rebooted it. And bottom line, the node, singular node, came up like it had before, no cluster in sight. So that's perfect. So that allowed me to separate back and go back to normal without any hitches. And I know it's a little weird because I'm talking about putting a cluster together with only 2 nodes, and again, that's not normal. You can here on Reddit, I found a guy. I was asking, talking to some folks, and he happened to mention this particular way of running it with some settings in the CoroSync config file. If you set it this way, he says you still get all of the good features except for kind of the most high availability portions of it. Getting all of the goodness that you need out of it with having essentially like a master-slave relationship. But and that's exactly what I want to do. I don't want to run both of these R710s 24/7. I don't need that kind of high availability. But what I would like to do is be able to put them in a node so that when I turn and have both of them on, I can sync files back and forth. That the databases will sync up. I can migrate machines back and forth. Kind of easier. It's a little bit slower using that system, but I think it is more native that way. But I want to be able to then shut that node, secondary node, down and have all of the ability to turn on my virtual machines, which with these 2 settings here, you get to keep. So his use case for it that he talks about here below, because some of the folks ask him, well, why don't you use a Raspberry Pi to set up the 3rd vote for quorum? And he just says, it's not worth it. And for all those different reasons, I agree with him, and it works. But again, I've had to refresh my machines, so now I'm that PVE2 that I was showing you is my primary one at the moment, while my other one is down. I'm waiting for some cables. I ordered some, and for the Perk H700 card that I purchased for it as an upgrade from the Perk 6i, and the A and B cables that I ordered from eBay don't fit. So I have to return those, and I got another set coming. All of this said, I do intend to do the clustering. I do intend to do it this way. But do you have to cluster your nodes? No. One of the things that I found the easiest way to do it, I struggled for a bit because I was trying to copy these, the virtual machine files that are under the hood in Proxmox, you can transfer those to a different machine, and I've gone through it before where you create the fake virtual machine and then you replace the virtual machine file in there. So long as you created it with the same settings and you set it up, as soon as you fire it up, it'll come on as if that was the original machine it was on. With Windows, I think it senses some hardware changes if there's any in there. But bottom line, you can switch these virtual machines around and copy them and bring them back in and online, and you don't need to create a cluster. But part of my problem is my NAS machines, again with those Samba shares, I was getting these timeouts. So I was trying to use FileZilla to use secure FTP and copy them over, and I kept getting timeouts, and it wouldn't. It was taking hours, even on a 10 gig network, to transfer these files back and forth. And I thought, well, that's not right. There's got to be an easier way to do it. And it turns out there is. It's just pure SCP. I don't know if that stands for secure copy, but you can, using this syntax here, and I'll post a link for this Linux one as well, this website, Linuxize. But basically what I did was the machine that held the virtual machine disks that I wanted to copy over, I went in and I SSH'd in, and I went to the directory where those are located, and I used this syntax here, SCP, and then the name of the file itself, then the the remote username, it's root on the other machine that I'm going to send it to, at its IP address, and then a colon, and then you actually put it in the /mount/PVE/ name for the storage device that you've got mounted over there on that one, /images. And actually I'll go ahead and show you where that's located here. Let's see, they are under mount, PVE. Let's see what we got. SAS, and it is case sensitive. SAS1TB, and then they're actually located in the images folder right there. So right now 109 on this running machine, that is my Windows virtual machine. So we're going to cd into 109. And the file, so there is the disk, which is the entirety of the virtual machine. Now that is a 500 gig file. So stopped the virtual machine, I shut it all down, made sure that the settings, because I copied the config files over and those are separate in a different location, but I made sure to set it to not start up at boot, in case I did use that exact config file, but I didn't. Yeah, so the command that you'd use here, and don't forget in Linux, tab is your friend. So SCP and then the file name. So we just type VM and hit tab, and it fills it in for us. And then it's root at, and then 192.168.0. I think it was 205, and then colon, that's important, and then /mount, /PVE/ let's call it 1 terabyte drive, and then images, and it'll just show up in there, not in a folder, it'll just show up in there in images. And you do that on purpose because what I do is, once you hit go on this, even on my 10 gig network, that takes an hour and a half probably or more for a 500 gigabyte file like that to copy itself over and be done. But it was super solid, super stable, and it was exactly what I needed. So once it's in that folder, I go into the PVE itself and I create a new virtual machine on that new drive where I've copied it to, on the new PVE rather, and you know, if this one here is VM 109, I try to create VM 109, and then I just create it without actually going with all the same settings that this virtual machine has, but and I try to make it 109, but I don't actually install it. I don't start it, but it goes ahead and it tries to create the blank drive, and it knows you haven't installed anything, and that's perfectly fine. Once it's done, but it creates the folder. So it creates folder 109, as you saw on this PVE. It creates that on the new one. Then you know, you delete essentially the empty virtual machine file that it puts into that folder 109 on the new machine, the new target, and then you copy, you know, the virtual machine that you created or that you copied over with SCP into the 109 folder, and it basically replaces it. So with a couple of tweaks at that point to the config file, you know, minor ones, hopefully, that virtual machine on that, you know, secondary PVE should fire right up as soon as you hit start. So, you know, it's again a lot of topics here. New method of adding hard drives under the directory method. Highly recommend it. The old method is a little clunky. It does work, but again, it's going to mess with you if you are going to at all interested in setting up a clustered node. If you do set up a clustered node, be very careful in doing that. Just know that breaking it out is not an easy process. Turning it on, super easy. Turning it off, not so easy. So there's that lesson learned. Copying, you know, the virtual machines between them. You can use SCP. You can you know, you don't have to use the node system. You can copy things back and forth. The speed of that copying is going to depend on your particular network and the size of the virtual machine files that you're using. So, you know, ballooning of the file system for the hard drive is your friend, and making sure that you go into that virtual machine before you shut it down and before you copy it, and you clean it out. So go in and delete any files. You know, if you've got large files in there, you know, movies, you know, TV, whatever is in there, skinny it down. That way, when it copies, it won't take as long. So, you know, hopefully some of this information was useful to everybody. You know, again, this has been my adventure over the past several weeks, working with you know, 3 of these different R710s in different configurations. I you know, picked one up for $50 from a local guy, and you know, replaced the motherboard in it and did all kinds of different tweaks to it as well. And you know, I'm keeping that one. So that's the one that everything's running on right now. Yeah, it's been fun. But if this has been helpful, or you can you know, fill in some blanks on me that I'm not understanding about some of this process. If I've missed something, let me know in the comments, and like and subscribe. Thanks.